What would you do if a maid whispered in French, just as you were about to raise your glass, and her eyes didn't carry the look of service, but a warning? Sometimes a sentence in a language you don't understand saves your life. The lavish dinner was lit by candles and crystal glassware. In the $38 million mansion, everything was perfect soft classical music, flawlessly pressed tablecloths, and French-style lamb cooked to perfection. But then, a moment no one expected. A maid, hair neatly tied, in a crisp white uniform where an Surton approached. She carried a silver tray with a glass of deep red wine, shimmering in the light. The host, James Ashford, a millionaire investor recently widowed, sat at the head of the table, nodding his thanks as usual. Marie, the maid, paused for half a second. Then she leaned in, as she had many times before. But this time, she wasn't just serving. She tilted her head and whispered in French, just loud enough for no one else to hear. "Don't touch it." James froze. Not because he understood French, but because Marie's eyes were unlike any he'd seen before. Not submissive, not pleading, not afraid. Only a warning. The glass stopped midair. Why did she say that? James's sister-in-law, Dahlia, tilted her head in curiosity, but only Marie knew the answer. And she would be the first to pay for that whisper. This was no ordinary dinner party. It was an evening meant to be intimate, but it was the climax of silent tensions that had simmered for months. Marie stood still, hands empty, the tray already placed on a side table. No one in the room understood what she'd said, but James's reaction made everyone pause. He set the glass down, slowly, as if afraid to disturb the thick silence enveloping the table. The glass made a faint clink, small but colder than the words. Dahlia was the first to break the silence. "Marie," she said, lips pursed, "are you all right?" Marie didn't answer. She only nodded slightly and stepped back, as if requesting to withdraw. One step, two steps. At that moment, the side hall swinging door opened, and Collins, the head butler, appeared. He didn't look around, didn't need to ask. His first words came, "What did you say to Mr. Ashford?" His voice wasn't loud, but cold, enough to make the other staff behind him lower their heads. In this mansion, everyone knew when Collins asked directly. Things had crossed an internal line. Marie turned. Her voice rang out, this time in English. "I only said, don't drink. Ihina." One sentence. But it made the entire room hold its breath. No one asked why. No one asked why she said it. Dahlia gave a faint laugh, shaking her head. "You seem under a lot of pressure." Marie stood still. She didn't argue. But her eyes didn't retreat. Marie was the longest-serving maid in the mansion, working since Mrs. Ashford was alive. She was once trusted with the key to the vintage wine cellar. But since Dahlia, James's young, beautiful sister-in-law, moved in, everything changed. Marie was repeatedly assigned to minor shifts, removed from guest service schedules, and recently even had her bag checked before leaving her shift. Sometimes, to say the right thing, you must accept being treated as if you've committed an unforgivable mistake. Marie didn't resist. She only followed Collins. But as she passed Dahlia, she paused. Their eyes met for half a second. Dahlia still smiled. But Marie didn't smile back. And in that moment, the most unexpected thing happened. A kitchen worker, Tessa, suddenly spoke up. "She's not lying." Tessa spoke those words, then immediately lowered her head, as if regretting it. Collins shot her a glance but said nothing more. Marie stood still. Her face showed neither surprise nor gratitude. She looked at Tessa for a second, as if unaccustomed to anyone taking her side, unsure how to react when someone did. Then, the back door of the mansion opened. Cold wind from the garden slipped into the hallway, carrying the familiar scent of jasmine, the flower mister. Ashford's late wife once loved. Marie used to pick those petals every morning to arrange in her mistress's bedroom. She came to the mansion when her daughter was 6. At first, just a kitchen assistant. But because Mrs. Ashford needed someone who knew French to read traditional prescriptions from the family doctor in Switzerland, Marie was promoted to personal aide. Her mistress once called her a maid who knows how to listen. When she passed, Marie thought she'd be let go. But James kept her on, without explanation. Time passed, and the mansion changed. The items her mistress loved slowly disappeared. The old kitchen was demolished for a gym. And then, Dahlia moved in. No one announced it officially, but Marie's shift schedule changed 3 days later. Dahlia, James's only sister-in-law, was never close to him while Mrs. Ashford was alive. She worked in wellness and lifestyle coaching with 3 small startups, none successful. Yet, after her sister's death, Dahlia declared she wanted to be there for her brother-in-law to help him through his grief. Marie once overheard a kitchen worker whisper, "She's not here for Ashford. She's here for the unopened will." Someone who truly comes out of love doesn't need to erase every trace of the deceased to claim their place. Marie never said this aloud. She only wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door to the break room. But as she stepped inside, she froze. On her desk was a sticky note with a single sentence. "Meet the manager after your shift." Marie picked it up. Red ink, not printed, but handwritten by someone familiar. She didn't need to read it twice. In this house, meet the manager after your shift meant a reprimand, a record in your file, or dismissal. The reason was never specified. Marie folded the note and tucked it into her pocket. But as she turned, she saw Linda, the manager's assistant, standing behind the door, arms crossed. "Have you seen it?" Marie nodded. Linda tilted her chin. "Good. Don't make me come remind you again." It wasn't the first time Marie had been summoned. But this was different, no prior notice, no specific reason, and coming right after she warned Ashford about the wine. It was no longer a coincidence. Marie walked toward the storage room where she kept her things at the end of her shift. As she passed, 3 young maids whispered something. One bowed in greeting, but none met her eyes. She knew well in this house, a single whisper could become a cut. Passing the glass hallway, where garden floodlights cast cold, sharp streaks of light, Marie caught her reflection. A middle-aged woman, back slightly hunched from years of carrying heavy loads. No makeup, hands calloused, but her eyes still steady and clear. She paused, adjusting a button on her uniform. Not out of fear, but to remind herself she still had worth. The mansion's management system had no formal complaints process. No cameras in the staff areas. All assignments, from schedules to room duties to private talks, were handled by handwritten notes or word of mouth. Marie had once tried speaking to Collins, the butler, about Dahlia altering the shift structure. In response, she got a week of cleaning the basement garbage area, a place with no natural light, reeking from parties she wasn't invited to serve. In this place, rules weren't written on paper. They were etched in silence and paid for in quiet. When rules aren't written, they can be bent by whoever holds power. And the powerless have only one way to survive: stay silent. Marie set down her kitchen cloth, removed her hair clip, and headed for the changing room. But as she turned, she froze. On the changing room door was another note, stuck in place. In feminine, slanted handwriting. "Keep your mouth shut if you want to keep your job." Marie peeled the note off the door. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from familiarity with such words. Each word was like a tiny pinprick. Not deep, but over time, enough to numb you to the insult. Only numbness remained. She didn't tear the note, didn't throw it away. Marie folded it carefully, tucking it into her pocket with the red note from before. 2 notes, one from a superior, one from a faceless sender, both saying the same thing. Shut up. Disappear quietly. That evening, she finished her shift as usual. No talking to anyone, no showing attitude. But when washing dishes, she wore thicker gloves than usual, as if afraid something could seep through her skin. The kitchen echoed with steady clinking, but it was unusually quiet. No one joked. No one played soft music. Everyone avoided Marie's eyes, like dodging a spill of oil on the floor, one that could trip them all if they got too close. Dahlia appeared at the kitchen door. In her usual white silk dress, she didn't look at anyone in the room. She just scanned it once, then said softly to Collins, "Tomorrow, don't let that maid appear upstairs again. I don't want a dirty atmosphere near my breakfast." Marie didn't respond, but she heard. And for the first time in years, she decided to do something against the rules. In Marie's area, no one was allowed to carry personal phones. The reason was to ensure absolute privacy for the household. In truth, it was to prevent staff from recording things they shouldn't see or speak of. But that night, Marie hid a tiny recorder in her sleeve. She placed it under the tea tray while clearing Dahlia's breakfast. Not for revenge, su hermana Wijihaman, but to have proof of the truth. Some might say she's being reckless, but sometimes that recklessness doesn't stem from anger, but from self-respect trampled for too long. Marie didn't know what would happen next, but she was ready to face the consequences. The next morning, sunlight poured through the large penthouse windows, reserved for VIP guests only. Marie pushed the door open, tea tray in hand. Her steps were steady, light, not sneaky, but there was something firmer than usual. Dahlia sat at the long table by the window, legs crossed, laughing with a man in a gray suit. Marie had never been introduced to this guest. She set the tray down, her hand briefly touching the small recording button. Ginger tea with mint, no honey as you requested. Her voice was even soft, but her eyes no longer looked down. Something was off in the breakfast room that morning. Marie sensed it the moment she entered. Dahlia had replaced all the tablecloths with ivory cream, a color never used on Mondays. In her 12 years working here, Marie had never seen that rule broken. Colors in this mansion were signals. Cream on a Monday meant someone wanted a fresh start, or someone wanted to erase something that happened before. Marie placed the tea tray on the table. No sound except the faint clink of a silver spoon against a white porcelain. Dahlia was already seated, chin resting on her hand, a small smirk curling her lips. "You're late with the tea." Marie nodded, no excuses. "Probably busy plotting against someone." Dahlia spoke as if joking, but her eyes were colder than ever. Marie didn't react. But in her pocket, she felt the hard edge of a small USB containing last night's recording. Dahlia didn't know, but Marie knew the line between keeping a secret and being exposed was a single ill-timed word. As she left the dining room, Marie didn't look back, but her hand instinctively gripped her pocket, as if loosening it would let the truth slip away. She climbed the second-floor stairs. The rubber soles of her shoes made soft, steady thuds on the wooden floor. At the turn, a male voice spoke, soft but clear. "Miss Marie." Marie froze. She turned, seeing the man from yesterday up close for the first time. The guest no one introduced. He wore a white shirt, collar unbuttoned, no tie, but exuded an unusual seriousness. "I'm Lucas, Mr. Ashford's new legal assistant." Marie didn't respond immediately. She looked at him, blinked once, then stayed silent. Lucas glanced around, then tilted his head, gesturing toward the small hallway by the library. By mansion rules, low-level staff were forbidden from directly approaching family members, especially VIP guests or private advisors. All communication went through Dahlia or Collins. For a legal assistant to call Marie's name in a private hallway was almost unthinkable, unless he had a reason to break the rules. Lucas spoke softly, just for Marie to hear. "I've heard the recording. From someone who can't be named." Marie held her breath. Her hand stayed on her pocket, cautious, like someone holding evidence in an unopened trial. Lucas continued, "And you should be careful. They're preparing to get rid of you, possibly in a way you can't come back from." He paused. "But I'm investigating something, and I think you'll want to know. Salvation doesn't always come with grand gestures. Sometimes it comes from one person standing by you, just when you're about to let go." Marie looked at him. Her gaze no longer held fear, but not quite trust either. She nodded slowly. "I'm ready." Lucas nodded back, slight but genuine. No one else witnessed that moment. But for Marie, it was the first time in years. She didn't feel completely alone. Marie returned to the kitchen with calm steps. But inside, she felt like she was holding a fragile glass. One wrong move, and everything would shatter. Lucas had warned her, and she understood her time in this house was being counted down by the hour. She was no longer assigned to serve breakfast, no longer on the upstairs roster. But today, Marie appeared in her old apron and, against orders, carried a tea tray to Mr. Ashford's study. Collins blocked her at the door. You're not allowed on this floor today. Marie looked him in the eye. He needs to hear this. Or we'll all lose more than a job. Inside the study, James Ashford was reading the paper. Seeing Marie, he frowned. I thought you were suspended. Marie didn't answer directly. She placed the USB on the mahogany desk next to his espresso cup. Just listen to the recording on this. Then I'm ready to leave, if you still think I'm wrong. James picked up the USB, hesitant. But Marie's eyes held nothing but calm. Collins stood behind, shaking his head, displeased. But he didn't stop her. The recording played Dahlia's voice, cold, clear. Don't worry. That glass of wine is light enough to only make him tired for a night. But if needed, I have something else. Marie is the last pawn. After that, everything is mine. James froze. He said nothing for the first 10 seconds. But his eyes shifted from doubt to horror. Under the old terms of Mrs. Ashford's will, if James were temporarily incapacitated, Dahlia would become the temporary guardian of the estate, with full control over financial decisions during that time. No one had ever considered such a plot until hearing that familiar voice lay it bare. Sometime, the truth doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to be placed before those with power and let them face the silence of betrayal. James set the USB down. He looked at Maria for the first time, not as a maid. Who else knows about this? Marie replied softly. At least one person in the kitchen. And Lucas. James sighed. He stood looking toward the glass door. The garden outside remained serene. But in the room, a storm was brewing. Silent, but certain. And at that moment, Dahlia walked in. No knock. No permission. If one. Just perfectly timed. The kitchen air was thick, like fog before a storm. Marie stood still, hands gripping the tea tray, eyes fixed on the sunlight streaking the stone floor. The steady tap of high heels echoed, then stopped behind her. Lindo, Serna Seridimon. She didn't need to speak. The scent of jasmine perfume and her cold control silenced the room. Marie, Linda said, voice soft as silk but cutting like a blade. Can you leave the kitchen now? Marie turned, unflinched. This is an official suspension, Linda continued. And you should know that recording violates the rules. In Marie's hands, the tea tray remained steady, but she no longer felt its weight. The room seemed to fade, blurring, leaving only Linda's face and the echo of her words, ringing in Marie's mind like a funeral bell. Lucas stepped into the doorway, about to speak, but Linda turned, raising an eyebrow. And you, if you're really a legal assistant, you should know you have no authority to interfere with the Ashford family's internal processes. Lucas opened his mouth to respond, but then fell silent. Something in his eyes, anger and powerlessness. Under Section 4, 2 of the Ashford Household Staff Handbook, employees whose actions affect the family's image or internal operations may be suspended immediately, without verification. In such cases, the decision rested solely with the senior coordinator, and Linda, as executive assistant and internal representative, held full authority. Marie didn't resist. She nodded, not out of submission, but because she knew she was stepping into deep water. A young maid handed Marie her bag, eyes down, avoiding her gaze. In the hallway, noon sunlight slanted through the glass, casting wavering streaks on the floor. Marie passed familiar rooms where she had cleaned, wiped, and silently overheard stories not meant for her. In the back garden, Dahlia sat sipping tea. She tilted her head, lips grazing the cup as if savoring the bitter taste of victory. Marie saw her, but she didn't stop. Sometimes, what breaks you isn't a blow, but an indifferent glance. No one shouted. No one cursed. They simply pretended you never existed. Marie stopped at the large iron gate. Lucas caught up, pausing a few steps away, close enough to be heard, far enough to respect her silence. I couldn't stop them today, he said, but I've backed everything up. And there's one thing that could change everything. Marie kept her back to him. What? Her voice low, dry as wind over a dead garden. Lucas answered, without hesitation. "A will. And it seems you're not the only one they want to erase." Lucas sat across from Marie in a small cafe 3 blocks from the mansion. The place was quiet, soft yellow light from the ceiling lamp warming the dark wooden table, a stark contrast to the conversation unfolding. On the table was a thin, worn folder, held together by a rusty clip. Marie stared at it, as if about to open a door with no return. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of time converging on this moment. Lucas slid the folder toward her. "This is a copy of the old will, drawn up before Mrs. Ashford passed." Marie glanced at the first line, "The Ashford Trust." Below it, faded type text mixed with Mrs. Ashford's handwritten notes, one corner. "It states clearly," Lucas continued, "if Mr. Ashford is incapacitated, temporary control of the estate goes to the internal overseer, not a relative." Marie looked up, frowning slightly. "The overseer." Lucas met her gaze. "You." Before her death, Mrs. Ashford had quietly appointed Marie, the only one who knew Mr. Ashford's medication and routine, as the independent overseer. The role was internal, not legally binding, but included an emergency clause if there were signs of Mr. Ashford being manipulated, poisoned, or mentally unstable. The overseer could request a freeze on all asset transfers. This had never been activated, because only Collins and Dahlia knew it existed. Marie stayed silent for a long time. The cafe remained quiet. The clink of spoons against cups rang clear, like a countdown ticking. She never thought she could change anything in that house. For 12 years, she lived like a shadow, knowing everything but powerless to speak. But then, the pieces came together. Mr. Ashford's sluggish breathing each morning, the times he forgot his own dog's name, the tea Dahlia prepared daily, no one else allowed to touch it, and the unlabeled medicine bottle Marie once saw Linda slip into her pocket when she thought no one was watching. She swallowed hard. What if I'm wrong? If I expose everything and there's not enough evidence? Lucas didn't answer immediately. He looked out the window, where an elderly couple cycled through a leaf-strewn alley. Then he turned back. "You'll be sued for defamation, and there'll be no coming back. They could accuse you of leaking internal information, forging documents, even fabricating testimony. But if you're right, you could save a man being slowly poisoned. The truth doesn't just need to be known. It needs someone willing to risk everything to reveal it. And sometimes, that person doesn't wear a cape or wield power, but an old apron and calloused hands." Marie looked at the will once more. She didn't read it all. She didn't need to. She folded it, tucked it into her pocket, looked up and said, "I won't tear that house down. I'll open every door and let them expose themselves." Marie stepped through the iron gate, returning to the mansion for the first time after 3 days of suspension. No one opened the door for her, but she didn't need them to. In her coat pocket were the USB, a copy of the will, and a newfound belief from within. The hallway was silent. The scent of fresh floor cleaner lingered. The chandelier gleamed, each bulb polished to reflect passing footsteps. Marie walked straight to the library, where Mr. Ashford was meeting with Collins and Dahlia. The door opened lightly as a breeze, but the hinge creaked like a warning bell. Everyone turned. Collins frowned. Dahlia stood almost instantly, her smile sharpening like a freshly honed blade. "Marie, who let you in here?" Marie didn't answer. She stepped forward, each step steady, her eyes fixed on Mr. Ashford. He sat back in his chair, eyes weary, hands trembling slightly. Before him was a poured cup of tea. Marie looked at it, and for the first time didn't smell the familiar mint. "You're suspended. Get out now." Dahlia stepped closer, voice hissing through her teeth. Marie didn't back down. "I just need to say one thing." In front of him, Collins looked at Dahlia, then nodded slightly. Marie pulled the USB from her pocket and placed it on the table. "This is the recording from the night of the incident. In it, there's a sentence that isn't mine. AI voice analysis software confirmed the order to change the medication before 6A wasn't Marie's voice. It was Linda's, the manager's assistant, Dahlia's confidant. This nullified all accusations that Marie had illegally tampered with Mr. Ashford's medication. Marie played the audio. In the stone-still room, the voice rang clear. Make sure he drinks it all. Only 3 doses left. The room fell silent. Mr. Ashford's eyes widened. He looked around, then gripped the chair's armrest, a gesture he hadn't initiated in 3 weeks. The truth doesn't need to shout to be believed. It only needs someone unafraid to stand up. Today, that person didn't wear a suit, didn't carry the Ashford name, and had once been thrown out of the house over a misunderstanding. Marie stood, bowed to Mr. Ashford, and walked out. But as the door closed behind her, a phone buzzed in her coat pocket. 3 days later, an unknown number, Portman-Pure, and this time, the voice on the other end didn't apologize. It was an invitation from someone higher up. Marie arrived at the Ashford and Langston law office at 9:02 a.m. She wore an old white blouse, hair neatly tied, shoes worn at the heels. But her eyes weren't those of someone who just escaped ruin. They were those of someone about to rewrite the rules. The door opened to a woman in a gray suit, wearing a name tag Clara Langston, co-founding partner, known as the Ashford family's ultimate legal arm. Clara glanced at Marie, then at the note in her hand. Marie Delacroix, come in. Mr. Ashford is waiting. The 12th floor meeting room was unusually quiet. Mr. Ashford sat at the head of the table, looking somewhat clearer, but his eyes still cloudy. Beside him was Lucas, and no Dahlia. Marie sat across. No side chair, no guest tea, just a pristine folder, a draft restructuring the trust. Lucas spoke first. We verified the entire medication history. 3 drugs weren't in the official prescription, 1 signed for by Linda with no doctor's oversight. Marie didn't blink. She only tightened her grip on her knee. Clara spoke. Mr. Ashford wants to appoint a temporary overseer, and since the medical records aren't clear enough for an independent decision, we want to hear a recommendation from the person he trusts most. Mr. Ashford turned to Marie. His voice was hoarse but firm. You're the only one who didn't leave, even when thrown out. They call it foolish. I call it loyalty. In Tanamisar. Inheritance law, if an owner is temporarily incapacitated and hasn't named a successor, a special trustee can be appointed through direct recommendation to the representing attorney. With the new medical records, Dahlia was suspended from guardianship for 30 days, and Marie, on per witness testimony, was the only one eligible under the continuity of care clause. Not everyone born into luxury deserves a voice. Sometimes, the one who cleans up what others overlook is the only one who sees the truth from the start. Marie held the pen. Her hand didn't tremble. The temporary overseer proposal was signed, with everyone's consent. But the real battle was never just on paper. Because in the mansion, one person still hadn't let go. And that night, an anonymous text arrived on Marie's phone. You think you've won. One insurance desmananan. Marie stepped into the glass-walled room on the 15th floor, overlooking the mansion's back garden. The air was so cold her breath fogged like mist. 3 ink-washed paintings hung on the wall, but only one round table stood in the silent space, where an older woman sat, back straight, silver hair neatly pinned like an exclamation mark in the quiet. The woman didn't turn but spoke first. You've stirred things up, Marie, but you've also made us look again. It was Mrs. Ashton, the independent overseer of the Ashford estate since before Mr. Ashford married his late wife. A discreet, powerful figure, and no friend to Dahlia. Marie stayed silent. She wasn't used to sitting as a negotiator. But this time, a chair was ready, and a hot coffee placed before her. The cups steamed lightly, the faint vanilla scent reminding Marie of mornings when Mrs. Ashford was alive, the only one in the house who ever asked Marie, "Did you sleep well last night?" Per the Ashford Trust's internal rules, if a representative was suspended for suspected misconduct, all unauthorized expenditures, including Dahlia's secret funding of a private memory recovery clinic, would face a retroactive audit within 30 days. If foul play was found, the first whistleblower would be fully exempt from prosecution and could propose joining the internal coordination board. Marie didn't know the law, but Mrs. Ashton did, and she made an offer. You don't need to become one of them, but we need someone Mr. Ashford trusts to verify every hidden transaction. Marie froze. Her hand instinctively tightened on the cup's handle. The coffee was still hot, but her heart grew slightly colder. She looked out the glass, to the garden where her daughter once played as a child. That was the only time Marie was allowed to bring family to the mansion, a fall picnic in her second year working there. Dahlia wasn't present that day. Only Mrs. Tuberhashimoanton, Ashford, who gave Marie's daughter a fairy tale book and said, "Your mother is a brave woman." And then Marie nodded. Not for a title, not for revenge, but because she didn't want that little girl from years ago to think her mother had bowed her head all her life. The meeting lasted another 40 minutes. Marie read every line, asked every detail. Ashton wasn't impatient. Instead, a satisfied look crossed her lined face. When it ended, Marie left with a thin folder containing a sealed archive access card and trust audit instructions. Some costs are invisible, not in paychecks, but in years of being overlooked, in silent bows for the sake of a child. Marie had paid enough. Now it was time for others to pay their share. But as Marie left the room, someone was waiting. Dahlia Surin Isinanam, no longer smiling, no longer shouting. She just stood there, holding a stack of files and a question Marie didn't expect. Why didn't you destroy me completely with what you have? You could have. Marie paused, and for the first time saw Dahlia as a person unraveling. Her gaze wasn't cold nor bitter. She only said, soft enough for just the two of them. Because I don't need to be the one to destroy you. You've already done that. You just haven't seen it yet. Marie didn't rush to respond. She looked straight at Dahlia, who once controlled the house with a snap of her fingers. Today, no one stood by her. No lawyers, no staff, just a trembling sister-in-law and a maid once cast out without mercy. I don't want to bring you down, Marie said, because you were never high enough to make me climb. Dahlia froze. Not because of the words, but because Marie wasn't angry. She had moved beyond resentment. A week after the meeting with Mrs. Sheridan, Ashton, the Internal Investigation Board issued its official findings. Dahlia had used her temporary authority to funnel funds to hidden accounts. She abused access to erase work schedules and internal penalties of those who opposed her. She deliberately concealed Mr. Ashford's medical records, especially a toxicology test request, signed by his private doctor but never sent. None of this could have happened without at least one person who tacitly understood and stayed silent. That person was Mr. Ashford's former assistant, whom Marie had warned years ago and who Dahlia fired shortly after. When the board read the findings, Marie wasn't in the room. She stood in the back garden, where the 20th anniversary of the Ashford Trust was being celebrated. The guests knew nothing of the investigation. But they noticed something unusual. This year's speaker wasn't an Ashford representative. It was the new head of human resources, who had served in the mansion for 14 years without recognition. Marie stepped onto the podium. Amid the background music, she didn't thank anyone, didn't cry. She said only one sentence. I don't think I'm special. I only know that sometimes silence is no longer a way to live. And today is one of those times. A smattering of applause rose, not loud, not uniform, but genuine. Lucas stood by the trees, nodding quietly. Tessa and a few former maids wiped tears in the service area. And Mr. Ashford, now more lucid, stood among the guests, the first to clap. Marie didn't seek them out. She only looked to the far end of the garden, where she once stood, handing out pastries to children at past events. Now, she no longer served pastries. She was serving something else, courage. Being vindicated isn't about receiving an apology. It's about doing what you believe is right, even when no one stands with you. Marie didn't need their gratitude. She just needed them not to repeat it with the next person. As Marie stepped down from the podium, a young black boy from the back row ran up, pressing a card into her hand. It read, "Can you come to my school to speak once I want my friends to know? People like us can stand on a stage too." Marie laughed, not from joy, but because at last she was seen as a human. That evening, Marie sat alone in the auxiliary kitchen out back, where she'd brewed coffee for countless parties without anyone remembering her name. The room was quieter than ever. No orders, no hurried footsteps, no hushed laughter from those behind the wall of power. Just the sound of a wall clock and the faint smell of burnt bread from an old oven. On the table was the boy's card. One side held a child's scrawled handwriting. The other a drawing a woman on a stage, wearing a uniform with her name embroidered, Maria. Marie touched the drawing. No tears, no nostalgia, just a clear feeling she no longer had to beg to be seen. Because today a child had seen her. The kitchen still had the broken clock she'd requested to fix 3 times, never approved. A grease stain clung to the wall corner, one she'd quietly cleaned for years, though no one asked. The small chair she sat in, once criticized by Dahlia for not meeting service standards, now was where she sat as the only one left standing right. She touched the coffee cup, long cold, but still fragrant with ginger. The scent of clarity. When Mrs. Ashton signed the addendum to the appointment, Marie became the first maid elevated to the Personnel Coordination Board, with veto power over decisions affecting staff welfare. Not because she sought power, but because no one else would stand up, and no one else understood the cost of years of silence like she had. Not everyone needs a stage to be heard. Some just need one moment without interruption, one moment of trust despite no title, one moment of being called by their name, and that's a lifetime of recognition. Marie didn't need anyone to bow to her. She just needed the world to look up and see she'd been standing there all along. As she stood, Marie tucked the boy's card into her wallet beside the first receipt she'd kept from her first year working there. Faded, worth a few dollars, but proof of a beginning no one remembered. Not to recall hardship, but to remind herself everyone has a day to be seen if they're patient enough to keep walking, even when no one claps. The kitchen light flickered and went out. Marie didn't turn it back on. She stood, grabbed her coat, and opened the door, streetlight spilling in as if, for the first time, the room knew an ending not dictated by orders, but by choice. The next day, Marie returned to the main kitchen, not as a maid, but as the personnel overseer, a role unprecedented in the Ashford Estate's history. She wore a new uniform, no longer the old brown dress, but a simple white blouse with a silver embroidered name tag, Marie B., internal steward. The first to greet her was Tessa. The girl trembled slightly but smiled. Marie just nodded, no words needed. They'd survived the harshest silence together. They understood each other. At the end of the hall, Mr. Ashford sat by the window. Sunlight fell on his silver hair, his hands resting on his lap. Marie approached, carrying nothing but a small notebook. "Mint tea?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. Marie smiled. "No honey anymore, but today there's biscuits like she used to make." He nodded. And in that moment, the house, once a place where Marie was invisible, felt like a real home. A month after the investigation, local authorities announced the Silent Staff Recognition Program, inspired by Marie's story. It was the first time a domestic worker was publicly honored for protecting both the employer's and staff's rights. An excerpt from the program stated, "When the lowest in the system can stand up without being silenced, that's when a system can truly function fairly." Marie didn't know how long the policy would last, but she knew, at least today, a boy believed his mother, or anyone like her, could change a mansion, a system, a generation. Being seen isn't about being celebrated. It's when people no longer look through you, as if you never existed. Marie didn't need to be called a hero. She just needed a chair, in the right place, at the right time, to speak the truth. And this time, they listened. As Marie left the library that evening, she paused before an old portrait of Mrs. Ashford. The painting had yellowed with time, but the woman's eyes still looked forward, as if never turning away. Marie whispered, "Do you see me now?" Then she turned away, not waiting for an answer. Because at last she'd learned, sometimes Being seen isn't about others turning to look at you. It's about daring to step forward, lift your head, and never look back. If Marie's quiet strength resonates with you, share this story and subscribe to the Unveiled Wealth channel to explore more journeys of justice, humanity, and transformation. Because, who knows, the next to stand up could be you.